We reported yesterday that Israel has increased its travel warning for Israelis traveling to Canada, raising the travel advisory to level 2, which indicates that Canada represents a potential threat. For more on the advisory, we were joined by Michal Cotler-Wunsch, Israel's special envoy for combating anti-Semitism.
It's a devastating moment that I think we should have heard the sirens of before this travel warning. I'll say in the aftermath, and we're about to actually bury Sarah in Kansas. Of course, Sarah and Yaron, who were Israeli diplomats, shot outside of a Jewish museum in Washington, D.C., in the aftermath of an event to talk about interfaith collaboration, humanitarian aid, and peace. The understanding that what we are going to see is this normalization of anti-Semitism that unleashes this lethal form that will continue to target not just Jews, but Zionists, anybody who actually supports and believes in the right of the state of Israel to exist, because that is the modern mainstream strain that has been normalized in Canada too, that in the name of justice, if you will, it has mainstreamed or justified the attack on Jewish students on campuses. And as I said, not just Jewish students, Zionists or anybody who supports or believes in the right of the state of Israel to exist on streets, online, and of course in the international institutions, in government spaces, and so on, with what has become the mainstream, modern, mutated strain that demonizes, delegitimizes, and applies double standards to the Jew among nations, that is the state of Israel, not just on October the 7th, but in response to the war that has been raging since. And there were sirens still heard in the state of Israel today in this multi-front war. And this is the 8th front of war that is raging, of which anti-Semitism, or the tsunami of anti-Semitism, is not just a prediction or the most reliable sign of what endangers and threatens humanity and freedom and the dignity of difference, but in fact, this huge warning sign that once again has mainstreamed anti-Semitism, justifying the attack of Jews in Canada too, and Israelis, and as I said, Zionists, because you need not be a Jew to be the target of this strain of what is an ever-mutating hatred.
We also asked Ms. Cotler-Wunsch what needs to be done for Canada to better combat anti-Semitism.
Thank you. So first of all, thank you for that question, because in many ways, Canada can lead the way in what the federal government itself has actually created, and that is the handbook on the operationalization of the definition of anti-Semitism. You know, the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance created, after a long democratic process, a definition that enables to identify all the strains of what is an ever-mutating hate, from the good old-fashioned traditional anti-Semitism that denies the Holocaust or that blames the individual Jew for what it is that the state of Israel does, to the demonization, delegitimization, and application of double standards towards the Jew among nations, which is the state of Israel. Canada, alongside more than 40 countries, more than 1,200 entities, adopted the IRA working definition of anti-Semitism. And we have to be very clear. You can't identify something without defining it comprehensively. You can't combat it without identifying it. And the federal government has adopted a handbook, not just the IRA itself, the definition itself that enables and demands to identify and combat all strains of what is an ever-mutating hate, but actually has published a handbook on how to operationalize each of the examples, the 11 examples, if you will, of this thousands of year-old hate that has mutated by latching onto the guiding social construct of each time: religion, science, and the secular religion of our times, human rights, recognizing that in many ways, if we only identify some strains of an ever-mutating virus, as we all know post-COVID, we enable the new modern strain to continue to run rampant and infect our spaces and places, whether it's online, in university campuses, in government, in any place and space, in education, in city spaces, in law enforcement, without using the IRA working definition and actually implementing this toolkit that the government itself published. And so that's the number one call to action. Use that resource that was created precisely in order to be able to enable countries, cities, universities, law enforcement to identify and combat anti-Semitism, and even more when it comes to Canada, implement that handbook that has been made accessible by the federal government, has been published in order to be able to be used across places and spaces. As I said, educational spaces, law enforcement spaces, municipal spaces, legislative spaces, social media or online spaces. And so Canada is really at a moment of reckoning of its own in the aftermath of what we think, if we think, is only exclusively able to happen in the United States with a gunning down in cold blood of Yaron and of Sarah, or of attacks that we see around the world, including in Montreal, in Toronto, in Vancouver, the targeting of individuals, of institutions, of schools. I don't need to tell you, there have been shootings at schools. There have been synagogues vandalized. There has been this mainstreaming of anti-Semitism, including in Canada. And this is perhaps which I call this never again is now moment, sounding the sirens that never again is right now.